It's funny that he says turn it over to our speaker, which to me, it seems like I'm part of the team, so I'm not the speaker. We're all the speakers today. But because I'm the speaker at the moment, and because we're talking about stress, and because I'm stressed right now, I thought maybe you could do a little breathing exercise that is really easy to do, help calm me down, and it's something that maybe you can learn to do if you have not done this before. It's something that actually nobody even has to notice that you're doing it. Maybe you noticed I was doing it up there a few times to try to calm myself down. But I'll describe it to you, then we'll do it together. So it's called the 6-second quieting response. So what you do is you push your stomach out, take air in, hold it for 2 or 3 seconds, then slowly let it out. While you're letting it out, you let your shoulders drop and just notice yourself trying to relax a little bit. Okay, so let's try that. You push your stomach out, so you don't raise your shoulders to take the air in. You push your stomach out to get the air in. So push your stomach out. Try it one more time. Well, I feel better. Do you? Hopefully. I would like to remind you that this is a Sabbath day and that it's a beautiful day outside. Even if it's raining or cloudy, it's a beautiful day. Why? Because Jesus created the day for us. Amazing, just amazing. And I would like to thank the pastors and the worship committee for allowing the health ministry team to take over the program today. It's kind of exciting. We've talked about this for a long time, and we appreciate the opportunity to be able to share with you some of the things we know, or maybe some of the things we've learned over the years. So now that you've completed that perceived stress scale, let's delve into the topic a little bit. I want to give just kind of a background. I know a lot of you probably understand, or maybe have taken classes in this, but let's just go through it again to remind ourselves. What is the definition of stress? The definition is many definitions, but let's see what the dictionary says. Mental, emotional, or physical strain, tension, or distress. Well, it seems simple enough. There's a book that I used in my stress management class when I was teaching here at Burman University. It was called Stress Management for Wellness. And Walt Schaefer is the author of it. And so quite a bit of this information will come from that, some of our basic stuff we're going to talk about. So do you have a common belief about stress? I'll give you a few of them. We're not going to go over all of them, but I'll talk about a few of the common beliefs, and let's see if you have some of those. One of the common beliefs is all stress is bad. Well, we heard in the children's story that even the kids didn't think that all stress was bad. So that's false. How about this one? The goal of stress management is to eliminate stress. Yes, no? Well, that's false too. How about this one? This is a really interesting one for Christians. A person can always adapt to difficult circumstances if he or she tries hard enough, excuse me, and I added, or prays more. What do you think? If we try hard enough, can we get to where we want to be? Well, probably not, right? Physical exercise drains energy that otherwise might be used to cope with stress. I figure that whoever has this idea is using it as an excuse not to exercise. I'm too stressed, I can't exercise. How about this one? Stress affects only adults. We know that in studies that have come out over the years and even more recently, that stress is affecting children younger and younger ages. So what is happening in our world today that is causing that? Are we as adults causing more stress? There's lots of things we could talk about in that, but all of these are false assumptions, right? Let's talk about the idea of positive stress. There's several kinds of stress. There's eustress, distress, positive stress, but the idea that, is there actually positive stress? What do you think about that? Is there positive stress? So Walt Schaefer says in his book, moderate, occasional elevations of anxiety can help us. Really? Moderate, occasional elevations of anxiety can help us? How could that be? So let's talk about a little bit. You probably know some of these already. Sometimes we need to respond quickly and forcibly in an emergency situation. So a car is just about ready to run you over and you have to jump out of the way. Well, you need some, if you didn't have any stress about this car almost running you over, you might not jump out of the way, right? Or how about if you come upon a scene of an accident or something happens and you have to quickly administer CPR. You're the only first aider there. Well, you need some stress to be able to have your body function in a good way immediately. It's actually useful in performing well under pressure. As that's what's happening to me today. Whether I'm performing well or not will determine as time goes along, right? But like a job interview, or a speech, or a school administration test, or something like that. It helps us prepare for deadlines. How about getting your taxes done? There's a deadline. So you have some stress in getting ready for the deadline, getting it done for the deadline. Or term paper, if there's any students in the audience here today. It also helps us push our limits. So we need stress sometimes in our lives. Stress kind of adds some variety and zest to our lives a little bit, but sometimes stress can turn into distress. So what is distress? This is interesting to me. It's when arousal in your body is too high to a stress situation or too low. Did you know that if your arousal is too low, that could cause distress also? So think about some of the common symptoms of distress. I'll give a few. Think about it for yourself. Poor concentration. Now remember, this is something that would happen on a regular basis. This isn't something like today. Poor concentration. I have my notes because a little stress is giving me poor concentration. I want to make sure I'm going to cover everything properly, okay? Short-temperedness, trembling hands, churning stomach, tight shoulders. So our breathing exercise is supposed to help calm that down a little bit, helps our body calm that down. Depression, fuzzy thinking, accelerated speech, irritability. I remember one time I was giving a talk at the hospital here in Lacombe. I was an occupational therapist there. And the ladies' auxiliary wanted me to tell them about what is occupational therapy. This was when I was the first occupational therapist in the hospital. That's how old I am. Anyway, I was doing my little talk, and I suddenly, like in about 3 minutes, realized I was talking so fast that I wondered if they could understand what I was saying. So I actually had the courage to stop and say, "Excuse me, I'm just really nervous right now, and I realize that I'm talking really fast. So give me a moment, I'm just going to relax, and I'll talk slower." And it worked. It helped me to be honest with them, and they all laughed, of course, which helped me laugh, and we were able to get on with it a lot better. So if we're having symptoms of distress, then we must think about the possibility of some stress-related disorders. So we all know about migraine headaches or tension headaches can be stress-related. That's fairly obvious, right? Non-cardiac chest pain is also something that can happen. Rheumatoid arthritis. Did you realize that rheumatoid arthritis is a stress-related disorder that we can talk about? Psoriasis, ulcers, lower back pain, cancer, dizzy spells, high blood pressure. We all know those things, right? Panic attacks is another thing. Did you know that experts estimate that between 50 and 80% of illness episodes, so just being ill, are stress-related? 50 to 80%, wow. That's amazing. So maybe there are some ways we could think about in dropping our stress. So how does actually stress contribute to our illnesses? So long-term wear and tear on the body, so this is when it's chronic. We're having stress for too long. So it causes wear and tear on the body and mind. It can directly precipitate a disease or illness. It can aggravate an existing disease like rheumatoid arthritis. And it can precipitate unhealthy habits such as alcohol, tobacco, drugs of all sorts, overeating, not sleeping well. Okay, so all those kinds of things are habits that become a problem. So there are actually costs to not having a healthy outlook on life. So for ourselves, for you, it's decreased productivity at work or school, whatever it is you're doing. It's joylessness, meaninglessness. You have more physical illnesses, you have lowered energy, those kinds of things. What about to others? Does your distress cause a cost to people around you? You think that's possible? Okay, let's look at this. Because you are distressed, you cause tension in the air. You end up giving a damper on freedom of expression because you don't want people to be able to express themselves. You can have open conflict, there's possible physical abuse. You actually can have low self-esteem of people in your own family. In other words, you don't think people in your family should have inequality. And you're not very attentive to the needs of others around you. What about in your workplace or let's say your school? So there again, you don't do very productive work. There's worker dissatisfaction. You can have conflict with coworkers. Absenteeism is another one. There's a large worker turnover. That becomes a problem too. But really, we have to think about this. Distress is unavoidable sometimes, correct? It's going to happen to us, and maybe more regularly than we want. But let's think about the positive things that can happen from distress. Maybe it's a basis for learning something new about ourselves or something new to help ourselves. Maybe we need a change in direction. So if we're distressed and the job is distressing us so much, or the school or our program that we're in, maybe we should consider a new direction. Here's a good quote by Maya Angelou. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. So that means that we can change lots of things, but we can't change it, and if we change our attitude, I have a feeling things will change for the positive part. So we need to identify our own zone of positive stress. And we need to have a perspective and a healthy lifestyle that helps us stay in that zone most of the time. Won't be all the time, most of the time. So I'm sure all of you have heard the New START acronym: nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, air, rest, trust in God. Did you ever think of that in terms of, we always think of that in physical health, right? Did you ever think of that in mental health? Every single one of those things will make a difference in our mental health if we can follow a better pattern. Interesting. So one of my Bible texts for today is from Job 8:21. He will yet fill your mouth with laughing and your lips with rejoicing. So this sounds like our face is a place to start. Let's think about that, our face. You probably saw my title, In Your Face. So here, let's think about how we can use our face to make a positive difference in our lives. In the devotional book, Energized, Pat Nordum tells a story about herself. So she worked in a high-rise building for elderly people, and she thought this was new, but it wasn't, but she discovered that even if she didn't feel like smiling and put a smile on her face, she felt better. She realized she couldn't go into talking with elderly people looking like a grump, so she would just put on a smiley face even though she didn't feel like it. And pretty soon she discovered that she was actually smiling. It made her smile. So in an article published in the Orlando Sentinel, Ronald S. Miller states, if we just assume facial expressions of happiness, we can increase blood flow to the brain and stimulate release of favorable neurotransmitters. Well, that's amazing. Even if we don't feel like it, it's going to make a difference. Kraft and Pressman did a study called Grin and Bear It, the influence of manipulated facial expression on the stress response. Okay, manipulated facial expression means that you're making yourself smile. So what they did, the people, of course, didn't know what the study was all about. There were 170 participants. And the thing that they were supposed to do is complete 2 different stressful tasks while holding chopsticks in their mouths. So holding a chopstick in the mouth produces a smile that's called a Duchenne smile. So I'll do it, and when you get home, you try it. A pencil, something that you can put in between your teeth. So Duchenne smile. I'm smiling. Isn't that cool? Look, you're all smiling too. I love it. See, you're getting neurotransmitters that are good for you already. Amazing. So they asked half the participants to smile, giving the other half no instructions at all about smiling. Interesting. All smiling participants, regardless of whether they knew they were smiling or not, so they weren't told what it was, they had this in their mouth, they were smiling, they were using the same muscles for smiling. So regardless if they were aware they were smiling or not, they had lower heart rates during the stress recovery of their tasks. Interesting. So these findings show that there are both physiological and psychological benefits from maintaining positive facial expressions during stress. When I taught one of the classes called Outdoor Basics, one of the things about when you meet a bear or a cougar, especially a cougar, do you know what you're supposed to do? Smile. Like, who would even have time to smile? Okay, so 2 things. First of all, you're in a stressful situation. It's changing. When you smile, you get some benefits. The other thing is, as far as a cougar goes, you're showing the teeth, so it gets a little nervous, like, wait a minute here, I'm not sure I can handle this thing that's there with these big teeth. Okay. In the book Great Controversy, Mrs. White writes, while the Christian's life will be characterized by humility, it should not be marked with sadness and self-depreciation. It is the privilege of everyone so to live that God will approve and bless him. It is not the will of our Heavenly Father that we should be under condemnation and darkness, which is distress, don't you think? I have observed some before and after pictures of people, some of them were my students, before they decide to give their heart to Jesus and then after. It's actually quite amazing the difference in their face. They're starting to reflect the face of Jesus by accepting him into their lives and trusting in him. And to have your face change because Jesus in your heart would be an amazing thing to show others around you in your community, in your church, in your family, wherever it is that you are. The research of psychologist Paul Ekman found that facial expressions elicit specific bodily responses. Now here's interesting. A facial expression of anger leads to an increased heart rate and skin temperature. So your skin temperature increases and your heart rate. Facial expressions of fear, similar but different, results in increased heart rate, but a decrease in skin temperature. So if we went through what these things do to your body, then we would understand that. But the interesting thing is, in this particular study, that these changes occurred in the body even if the person was just giving that facial expression but wasn't angry or wasn't fearful. So if your face is showing fear most of the time or anger most of the time, your heart is actually, it's changing what's in your body. Your heart rate is going up. Your blood pressure is going up. And you aren't even angry. So maybe our face does have something to do with how we're feeling and what it's doing to our body. So even if we smile when we don't want to, it is beneficial to us. I would tell my students in the stress management class that I would teach at Burman University, I said, try an experiment of one. You know what an experiment of one is? Your experiment is just on yourself. You're not including anybody else, it's just you. So I would tell them, do an experiment of one with smiling, and smile more, and smile during your exams, and smile when you're meeting people on the sidewalk. So they were supposed to try to prove to themselves that they would do better in school, with a bonus of less illnesses, or less days of missed school because of illness. So that was my challenge to them, to do an experiment of one. DeWitt Williams wrote a devotional, Be Happy and Live Longer. He tells about important studies of Drs. Belloc and Breslow, about 7,000 people near San Francisco. There were simple questions that were asked for health habits and observed causes of death. It found age of death to be associated with certain habits, obviously. So we often think of diet and exercise as probably the most important things why people die. No, it actually isn't. The greatest contributor toward longevity was people who were happy. Something to think about. In Counsels on Health, Ellen White says, in order to have perfect health, our hearts must be filled with hope and love and joy. DeWitt says again in his stories that joy and happiness can get flabby, just like our muscles get flabby if we don't exercise. We actually have to practice this. We actually have to make an effort. Interesting. So everything in life doesn't just come to us. We actually have to practice. Happiness is an option that we must choose. God gave us the power to choose, and so we must choose to be happy and to smile. And if we don't, we're going to lose it. And pretty soon, that joy and happiness, the smile on our face, atrophies, and it's hard to get it back because then you have to practice again. Philippians is called the joy epistle. Paul wrote this short letter and he said, I have learned how to get along happily, whether I have much or little. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I've learned the secret of contentment in every situation. Imagine meeting Paul in Lacombe. Can you imagine you're walking down the street and, there's Paul, the Apostle Paul, hi. He waves to you, but you notice that, he's been smiling at people he's meeting and he, greets people once in a while and he sees you, he waves back, so you cross the street so you could chat a little bit. And he actually had the sermon 2 weeks ago and it was amazing. So you tell him that you appreciated his sermon and he talks to you and, your acquaintances from church. And you go away talking to Paul because he's a happy person, and you go away smiling. And the next person you see, you smile at them because you're already smiling. You haven't dropped that smile yet. And then that person goes on and they smile because you smiled at them. They smile at the next person. Amazing. Lacombe is a beautiful place, isn't it? And so is our church. So what is the secret, do you think, that Paul has? Let's read the text. Rejoice, this is what he wrote, rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, we need to include those, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. That would make us smile, wouldn't it? Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. So, the reflection of Jesus in your face helps prepare you for the reward of all rewards, eternity with him. Henry has some important information for us.
Maybe I can actually keep DonnaLee up here because I would like her to react to your score. Karen and I quickly in the back, we use a spreadsheet and we tally up our score. This is the norm table for the PSS item, based on about 2,400 people. That's the breakdown of how they scored. When you add them together, roughly they are in the non-stress range. The total score roughly is around 13. Now, would you like to know your score as a church? Now, this piece of paper, I'm going to pass it to DonnaLee. This is the result. If I break that down into age group, our 18 and 29-year-old, there are not a lot of them here, but their score is 18.2. Our 30 to 44-year-old, their score was 24. The 45 and 54-year-old, 13.2. And 55 to 64-year-old, 8.6. And now the vast majority of us, which is 65 and over, what do you think our score is? It's 14.7. So generally speaking, across the board, what we're looking at is that the church is telling us that we feel moderately stressed. So I would just like to now, just first of all, ask DonnaLee, what was your score this morning? And then I'm going to ask you to comment on the church scores.
My score was 7. The church score, and the thing is, this is in the last month, right? So it depends on what your level is at that moment. My score could have been a little higher because of some events that happened last weekend at a funeral that it was a difficult funeral to be at. But it was something that I didn't need to actually address.
So I would like now for DonnaLee to comment on the fact that among our age groups, 3 of those, the 18 to 29, 30 to 44, and the 65 and older, their numbers are significantly higher. Now, I must say, this is what we actually just quickly calculated that. We have not done the statistical analysis on it. We don't know what the standard deviation is. But nonetheless, I think it gives us a glimpse of what we're looking at. So how do you feel about our church, actually, in a few segments of the population showing at least a minimum of moderate stress, if not severe?
Well, if we're looking at the age groups and we're considering 30 to 34 being fairly high, let's think about that age group and what's happening during that time. They have children that are in school, that are possibly getting into high school. I just can't, I'm trying to think of ages I was at this point. High into the work mode of what's happening, trying to get things under control in family and life. Maybe parents are aging. So this can be a stressful time in a person's life. The 65 and older, in what's happening in society today, it's difficult because maybe you can't live alone anymore. Maybe you have to go into a place that you don't want to go into. Maybe there's family members that are being more aggressive than you want them to be, okay, that kind of thing. In terms of the 18 to 29, it's interesting because in the population, in the general population, I should say, in North America, that age group, 18 to 29, is actually the highest rate of depression and anxiety and burnout, actually, of all the ages in the populations. So this is a significant thing we need to think about in our church and our conference in terms of how can we be of a benefit to people of this age group. And I think it's cool that our church is doing a program where we can invite students over to our places with being able to be friends with people around us, especially that young age group. One thing that impressed me, I think I would have permission to talk about this, at the funeral that we went to last weekend, it was a funeral because of a young person, age 20, that committed suicide, a family member actually. And it's very, very difficult to go through any death, of course, but something like this is so hard to understand sometimes. So last Sabbath at the church, well, actually, let's go to the funeral first. I was so impressed because the pastor did not brush anything under the rug. Like, it was talked about freely what happened, and it was an amazing service. It was actually a service that caused people to start healing already at the funeral. He had talked with the family members to, how they wanted to organize this, and they were very happy with that fact. In fact, even in the bulletin or brochure, whatever you call it, there was a little place there that showed a website you could go to for possible thoughts of suicide or helping someone along that way. And then last Sabbath, the pastor again had a service that related to all of this. Nothing hidden, nothing slid under the rug. And the parents were actually at the church service. During the Sabbath school lesson, it was a small church, during the Sabbath school lesson, the conference had sent a pastor and the pastor of the church, and I think there was a counselor there. They took all the youth, because there was a lot of youth there and that were friends or cousins of the boy that passed away. They took all those kids and they talked with them. They let them cry, they let them talk about their anger to God, about all the different things, the emotions that they were having. And the conference, the Manitoba-Saskatchewan Conference, has offered to any of those young people that need counseling that they'll pay for half of it. That's amazing. That's what our church needs to be doing, is working with our young people and people that are under distress situations. That's the big thing in this day and age, the things that are stressing us. Satan is working really hard to get us at a place where he can keep us away from Jesus. And this is really important.
And thank you, DonnaLee, for your sage advice. In the sake of making sure that our service ends on time, I won't go much deeper. But what the result tells us is that even though we look great today, we look very much together, there's a significant degree of stress among us. So maybe actually we can take the time to greet someone and ask them how are they really doing. Just sort of as a closing statement, in the Health Committee, we are reminded that God had left us treasures of divine grace at our disposal. As a committee, we have been studying and examining the ministry of healing. Something that I think most of us are somewhat familiar with, right? We've heard about the natural remedies like air, sunshine, and diet, and so forth. But there's a whole lot more in that, principles and ideas that we can implement in our lives. So I'm just going to bring DonnaLee back up. Just as a final comment, before she gives us the benediction after the song, it's like, can you summarize some of the key messages that God is trying to impart to us through the ministry of healing? And I'm only going to give her 1 minute.
I'm not going to take 1 minute. I'm just going to tell you, read it. Read the ministry of healing. Read your Bible. I think the key things that I would think about is that we need to pray, we need to read the Bible, we need to help each other.